Değerli konuklarımız tekrar hoş geldiniz.
Distinguished participants, welcome again. After the lunch break, we are proceeding with our next session on the second day of Uludağ Economy Summit. This session has been sponsored by Intel, and we are starting to our session called Building Billion Dollar Company. From Pegasus Airlines, Ali Sabancı to the floor, please. Ruvix Ltd, Joseph Mambwe to the floor. North Holding, Matthias Kues to the floor, please. From IG Expansion, Jose Marin, the founding partner, to the floor, please. Türk Economy Bank, Ümit Leblebici, and Mynet Group Executive Committee President, Emre Kurttepeli. And in order to moderate this speech, I would like to invite General President of Intel, Burak Aydın, to the floor, please. Yes, we can start to our session if you want. We are getting closer to the end of this summit, and this is going to be a very enjoyable session. I believe that. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Rauf from Capital magazine for this organization, because this is the fourth time we are organizing this summit, and every time it is improving itself. Okay. Today, we will be speaking about the entrepreneurship and how can we establish a billion-dollar company. First of all, I would like to make a small introduction. When we are speaking about entrepreneurship, we are speaking about an ecosystem, an environment which is full of businessmen and businesswomen. And we are crowded with businessmen and businesswomen in this room. And in the ecosystem of big companies, the entrepreneurship should be present, because the entrepreneurship is establishing the macroeconomic balances. And if you take a look to the global economy and evaluate the United States economy, you will realize that the big engine of the U.S. economy is the information technology startups, because after the Industrial Revolution, together with the technology, we reached to a period in which the automation reigns, because together with the automation, the service sector gains the foreground. In today's economy, the entrepreneurship is in the core of the global economy, both in terms of growth and both in terms of economic development. I would like to give a couple of figures, and then we would continue with our panelists. We are speaking about entrepreneurship. For example, BMW. BMW sold 2 million items last year. And they have $77 billion of turnover, and they do have the market capitalization of $220 billion. What about Tesla? Tesla is selling 30,000 electronic cars, and they have the actually the turnover of $4 billion. It is actually a startup, although they are selling these new kinds of cars, and the number is not very big, but the turnover is very big. Elon Musk has such a story. He received some funds from PayPal. In the age of 12, he learned how to code programs, and the first game that he coded was sold to $500. So, I mean, that person, Elon Musk, was an inborn entrepreneur. So, besides the big companies, right now the startups are actually creating a huge value in the global economy. What about New Zealand? New Zealand has the population of 4.5 million people, and their GMP is $30 million. New Zealand was known to be an agricultural country, but they are exporting information technology products with the equivalent of $6 million. Today, all of those cartoons that we are watching on TV and the animation movies are coming from New Zealand. Turkey has the population of 77 million people, but our entrepreneurship export is less than $500 million. If you compare the New Zealand and the Turkey, you can understand what I mean by giving you those figures. What about Turkish Airlines? Turkish Airlines has been founded in 1956, and they have 24,000 employees, and they are creating $10 billion of turnover, and their market value is $4.5 billion, because operating Turkish Airlines and managing the operation of the Turkish Airlines is quite challenging. It is one of the biggest aviation companies in the Europe, but their market value is not so high. What about Nest? Google acquired Nest, and they have the higher actually market value with comparison to the Turkish Airlines. So we can understand that those startups are really contributing to the economy. So in this session, we will speak about the emerging markets and how can we establish billion-dollar company in the emerging markets. If we can have those billion-dollar companies in the emerging companies, Turkey can have a chance to be in the top 10 economies in the world. So we have to eliminate our actually competitors, India, Russia, and Italy. They are ahead of us. And South Korea is in the 14th place. So we have to be much more creative than those countries, and the entrepreneurship should be much more encouraged in Turkey if you want to get ahead of them. We should actually, this is the time for Turkey to leap forward. It is not a time for Turkey to go forward, but we should jump and we should cover much more spaces. So, right now, I would like to continue with our panelists. We have many important guests. I would like to give the floor to Joseph. The first question is coming to you. When I evaluate the CV of Joseph, he was born in Zambia. He was he lived in Botswana, and then he went to England, and he was actually studying in the Cambridge, and he established his own company, and he is the most successful student entrepreneur in the UK. I would like to learn one thing from you, Joseph. Why entrepreneurship? What did you dream when you are becoming an entrepreneurship, and what kind of challenges did you encounter with? I would like to learn all of those.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Ralph for tweeting me, actually, and inviting me here to speak. I cannot express how grateful I am that you have me here. I've met so many extraordinary people, and it's something that I'll remember for the rest of my life, so thank you. Before I answer your question, I'll sort of want to address the billion-dollar question first. And first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Joseph Mambwe. I run a software company called Ruvix. In short, what we do is that we create ridiculously beautiful apps, as we call them, for mobile applications. And we're also building technologies to help developers create the next generation of mobile applications. Now, in terms of my perspective on the billion-dollar question, it comes in two parts. The first part naturally leads into the second. And the first point is my location in Europe. So as well as running my software company, I'm also currently finishing my master's in engineering at Cambridge University in the UK. And being in Cambridge and also quite heavily involved in the entrepreneurial community there, I've had a unique perspective as to what was recently called the most successful tech cluster in Europe. You see, because 20 years ago, Cambridge didn't have any billion-dollar companies. Fast forward to today, we have about 14 billion-dollar companies. Now the question is, What has happened in the last 20 years that has spurred the growth of these enormous companies of extraordinary scale in what is a relatively small geographic area? And I believe it is to do with proximity, talent, and capital. You see, because the way the ecosystem is currently set up is becoming increasingly similar to Silicon Valley in the sense that we have a lot of close proximity of different sort of factions. So in essence, we have what was discussed in the panel yesterday, that we have a holy trinity in the sense that we have the talent, we have the capital, and we also have innovative companies coming out of that equation. And in terms of the risk profile of these companies, they're not necessarily as risky as those in Silicon Valley, but what they do have is a strong technological base, which I believe is important in terms of creating the next generation of billion-dollar companies. Because, of course, it is without question that technology as an umbrella field will dominate the future. And you just have to observe the trends to see that technologists or those who keep in pace with technology will rule the future world. So a key thing that has happened in Cambridge is an exciting entrepreneurial community has begun to form around technological centers. So from entrepreneurial grants to competitions to research commercialization initiatives to startup incubators, what I've seen happening is an increased emphasis on creating companies that solve extraordinarily large and difficult problems that can only be solved by the type of people you find at a place like Cambridge University. And to me, this is poetry, because what it means is that our technologists are beginning to dream bigger dreams. And the level of ambition amongst them has risen. And that's the substance of what I want to say today, in the sense that in order to create the next generation of billion-dollar companies that will undoubtedly address the problems of the future, we need to make sure that the people who are actually capable of solving these technological problems are inspired to do so. And I believe those people are the technologists. And what I mean by that are the programmers, the engineers, the scientists. And following on from that, I believe it's important that these technologists have a grand vision of the future, not just iterative, but disruptive ones. And so again, to create billion-dollar companies in Turkey, I think you need more dreamers, basically, but not just any dreamers, technological dreamers. Furthermore, centering your entrepreneurial communities around where the technology is happening, along the leading edge of research, innovation, and technology, I think, and coupling that with investment is bound to create phenomenal companies that can compete on a global scale. And finally, I believe this investment in technology should extend down to the young people like me, and who have the thirst, energy, and hunger to create the next great companies of tomorrow. So I hope in that short introduction, I've sort of exposed a little bit of my motivations towards entrepreneurship in the fact that there's a potential to have extraordinary scale. I'm in the mobile space, mobile and web space, and the ability to have impact was the initial sort of pull for me to come into entrepreneurship. And just the ability to reach a lot of people across the world is why I kind of started my company.
Çok teşekkürler.
Thank you very much. Right now, Jose Marin, I would like to address my second question to him. Jose is actually a serial entrepreneur. He has invested over 160 companies, and the companies that he invested are the hyperscale companies, big companies. I would like to learn one thing from Jose. In Brazil, they actually created the competitor of eBay. In such an ecosystem in Brazil, this company was successful. At the same time, you are investing in the United States as well. So you are investing in the emerging markets, but you are also investing in the developed markets. What is the difference between the emerging markets and the developed economies in terms of entrepreneurship and the ecosystem that they do have? This is my question.
Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure. But let me start by saying that when I built my first company, this was already a while ago, the internet in Latin America was basically non-existent. So that means that to start my business, I needed to invest about $3–4 million in infrastructure. That's something that I could do today with $25,000. So that gives a little bit of a perspective of how things have changed since. But what I would say is we were pretty early in the market, and some of the challenges that we've seen there have improved, but they have not been solved. I think that the biggest challenge that we faced as entrepreneurs in emerging markets has been raising capital. When you are launching a business in places like Turkey or Brazil or other emerging markets, you find that there's not a lot of availability of, I would say, growth capital. So sometimes you can pull it off to bring in the first $2-3 million, but when you need to raise the next $5, $10, $15, $20 million to really consolidate the business, still under a structure where you are not profitable and where you are testing the unit economics, it becomes really challenging. Now, what we were very lucky on is that we raised a lot of capital in my first business and we were able to go through the hump. Then the market started to pick up and eventually we were able to build a cash flow positive business. We had to compete with eBay because eBay invested in my competitor that ended up having 70% of the market. Then eventually we merged the two companies together and the company went public. But what I would say is the biggest challenges that I faced in emerging markets were, I would say, first of all, being able to have the right access to capital. Second, not necessarily always being able to find people that are really thinking big. I think that that's something that we all need to work on as a community, being able to, to show that there is things that can be done that are, hard, but at the same time that can really change the world. Building a company is most of the times pretty much related to people, no? So I think that's what I would say about building a business in emerging markets. I think that when you compare that to the US, there's really a very big difference. I mean, in the US you have a culture that I think is key, and it's something that I think we also as entrepreneurs need to be working on, which is, be able to embrace failure. When you go to Silicon Valley, you talk to an entrepreneur and maybe he has built 2, 3, 4 companies and his last company just didn't work. He got capital from people and, people understand the name of the game. They understand that, you can go in there, try, and if eventually it fails, you learn and then you move on to the next one and you'll still be funded. Of course, as long as you are a hardworking and ethical person. No? So I think that is a very important part of the ecosystem that needs to be created. I also think that, the cluster effect that Silicon Valley shows is very unique. If you move around 50 miles, you'll be able to access, billions and billions of dollars of capital. You also are able to find a very big cluster of talent, which is absolutely critical when you want to recruit. It's becoming increasingly hard and expensive, but at the same time, there is some incredible people that you can access to. So if I would think about the implications of that to emerging markets is we need to build access to people. We need to build access to talent, and we need to make sure that we are conscious about that. We also need to make sure that, great business people like you guys, not necessarily all of you come from the technology background. And one of the things that we've been seeing is that more and more when people like us, that have started companies, that understand the space, generally go back and support businesses in the space. We would love to be able to get, more people in the traditional industries, to back some of these entrepreneurs, and I think that will start making a difference. So these are, I would say, some of the key takeaways. I think that building a business in the US can be challenging, but you have much more stability. When you go to emerging markets, you need to, first of all, to think big. Turkey is a great market, but not necessarily big enough, to always be able to make $1 billion business. I think that sometimes people have to think outside of the borders of Turkey and say, well, I'm going to think regionally, I'm going to go to other markets, why not? What limits you? So I think that is very important. And then, be able to create the right environment for people to, to be able to get funded up to the stage where private equity comes in.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Jose. My third question will be to Matthias. You are actually managing a big fund, and this big fund is diverted to different sectors. Technology is included, healthcare sector is included. What do you consider when you are making an investment, especially in the emerging countries? So, I mean, these companies in Turkey, if they want to receive some fund from you, what they should do right?
I don't think that that is necessary to have $1 billion firms to create a stable economy. We invest in, for example, service companies, or you have trade companies, retail, very big retail, very small retail companies in Turkey. The most important is to have a good management, not only on the first level, on the second and on the third level. And if you want to create a $1 billion or lira company, you have to look for talents. Sometimes people look only for talents in their own family. I think then that's difficult to create a $1 billion company. But if you want a sustainable effect, I think it's not the target to make $1 billion turnover. It's the target to make $1 billion turnover and $100 million profit. Because without profit, every company has a short time. You can borrow loans from the bank, but without profit, the end comes soon. And we saw some mistakes in technology startups, because if you want to catch a rabbit with a carrot, often the entrepreneurs make the mistake that they taste the carrot, but the rabbit don't. So you have to view everything from the customer side, and not only from the technology side. To make a company big, it's, I think, easier if you don't have to spend so much money for equipment and so on. So in the app industry, it's easier. In the service industry, perhaps in the software industry, if you invest in heavy metal technology, you need much more money. For a country like Turkey, we started the private equity business in Germany. In Germany, people started the private equity business 45 years ago. And if you want to build up a company, you can build up with own money. If you have own money, perfect. If your family has money, perfect. But in the panel today, I think it was the first panel, somebody says you should have not or even so much loan than turnover. And I think that's not healthy. You need equity to build up a growing company. It's a joke in our industry. We say first cash is king, but equity is King Kong. It makes you independent from banks, and you know the financial situation is completely different since 2007, 2008, since the financial crisis. And I don't really know the figures, but I think the interest rate in Turkey is for young company double digits. So if you have to pay 10% for your loan, and if you need much more loan to increase up to 1 billion, you need equity. If the equity comes from private individuals, as said, it's perfect, or from the family. But my hope is for Turkey that you establish systematically a private industry, a venture capital industry, with guys who give not only money, but additional management support. Thank you so much.
Çok
Thank you very much. I would like to stop here for a while because our main topic is whether we can establish a billion-dollar company in Turkey or not. And our main aim and our main question is to find out whether we can have a $1 billion company in 5 years or not. I would like to address this question to the audience. Do you think that there is going to be a $1 billion company in 5 years in Turkey? If you believe, please raise your hand. So the 30 or 35% believes that billion-dollar company will be established in Turkey in 5 years. So I would like to address that question to Mr. Ali. Mr. Ali actually left their family company, and he is a good role model because he was chasing after his dreams. Do you believe that there is going to be a billion-dollar company in Turkey in 5 years? What do you think? You are actually addressing these hard questions to me. You gave an example, and in 2 different sectors from 2 different geographies, you spoke about 2 companies. One of them was Turkish Airlines. I mean, there are actually billion-dollar companies in Turkey, but the numbers of them should increase. For example, my company is 10 years old. I don't have 24,000 employees. I have 3,500 employees. And it is open to public, and it is actually $20 million less than $1 billion. Right now, the value of my company is just $20 million less than $1 billion. But especially in the not the technology intense business, but the asset intense business can lead to a $1 billion company. I actually, for example, Joseph said, community important. And ecosystem and the community, we are actually using the same terminology for the entrepreneurship. And he spoke about the inspiration. And Jose said, you should embrace the failure. How many of you actually, how many of yours company went bankrupt? You are a liar if you do not have any company who went bankrupt. For example, 2 of my companies went bankrupt, but I learned from this. Therefore, the last speaker said, you should embrace the failure, but you should not only focus on the turnover, but you should focus on the sustainability and the profit. I mean, just here, there is 3 $1 billion company. But, I mean, if there are 13 billion dollar companies existed in Turkey, it will be better. I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic about this. If we can dream, if we do not hesitate to try and fail, if we do not hesitate to become failure, we can be successful. And by the way, we should understand the needs of our customers. We should not establish a company based on our needs, but the customer needs. Then we can have billion-dollar companies. Thank you very much.
Dönmek istiyorum.
I want to turn to Mr. Ümit right now. One of the most important pillars is finance. Yesterday, Mr. Nihat commented that in order for big projects to be realized, the banking sector should stand beside us. And God bless the banking sector, he said, because they had been doing that so far. Even if it's a small-scale project, you need financing. Jose has just said it. Finding a fund for yourself is something different than spending your family's money. It is better. So do you think that some additional steps should be taken in order for Turkish entrepreneurs to access financing. Before that, I would like to thank Mr. Nihat. Well, it was the first time when somebody actually thanked bankers, so I would like to congratulate him. It is all about creating your own infrastructure. While Jose was speaking, he was talking about a cultural environment in the USA which led him to success because there is a culture. And I think we can do it in here too. We have experience in SME banking, and we believe that SMEs take up important space in a country, but below them there are startups. What do startups address as a problem? They generate solutions against inefficiencies, but they have to be able to sell the solutions. How do we do that? We need to breed them. This is why we started entrepreneurship banking and started supporting people's projects. But it is not sufficient that only we do it. Additionally, we need financial liberalization and broaden capital markets. Turkey still has a lot to do in that ground. A credit line of 850 million Turkish liras have been allocated to SMEs, for example, and that triggered something in the ecosystem. Taxation legislation needs to be revised, and let's say that the public sector has been doing a lot in that sense. Meanwhile, we still want them to support private equity ventures. The problem with this country is that we have 77 million people, and to create global companies in here, we need to think global. We are talking with people who are applying for credits. There are fine engineers among them. We ask them, what are you going to do with this money? He says, I will go and do trade. And he means he's going to sell stuff like car tires and compete with other car tire retailers. But what we expect from engineers like him is to come up with an entirely new product and then market it. If we can ensure that, then we can generate $1 billion companies. In the morning, we also realized that Turkey is changing trends. As manufacturing activities are being performed everywhere around the world, firms in Turkey, as economy emerged, need to open up to abroad. They need to invest in different areas like China, Europe. Also, taking a look at my own bank, I can see that some startups are aiming for abroad. But at points of inefficiency, we can probably start investing into startup opinions. Now we will go on with my friend Emre. In various competitions and meetings, we meet usually in environments where entrepreneurship is discussed. But in competitions in Turkey, where entrepreneurs are pitted against each other, you have about 100 and 150 participants. They can only get so far. This is because they are hopeless. We need to increase the number of projects being submitted for competitions. Emre knows about America very well too, and he is also one of the serial entrepreneurs of Turkey. What do you think if you compare both sides? In Turkey, what do entrepreneurs lack? What is it that we cannot do completely? Let me put it this way. Can we change the question like this? Why are there no billion-dollar companies generated in Turkey? Other than that, let's ask, are there $1 billion companies around the world that are established by Turkish people? I believe the number would exceed 10 or so in the USA. Think about Chobani in the yogurt manufacturing area. There are such firms established by Turkish people abroad. I mean, it is not a problem with Turkish people. It's a problem of the country that we live in. If we cannot see this aspect of the problem, we will continue to pointlessly argue about entrepreneurship. There is something that we do to these people that causes them to be unsuccessful, not in terms of uh, businessmen helping them or not. Think about Ahmet Ertekin. He has $1 billion firm, Columbia Pictures. Why did he have to go to America and do it? I could actually talk half an hour about this due to my experience with entrepreneurships. But I have to underline that there is problem with funding. The population is large. There is an underdeveloped ecosystem. That is true too. But thematically speaking, I think we have forgotten to dream. If I examine the Turkish business world, including industrialists, internet businesses, I think it should all be about having a dream and seeing it be fulfilled. Outside, for example, we have Turkish coffee machines. The firms manufacturing them are valuable Turkish firms. Do they ever think in the board of directors, how many people are we going to sell these to in Turkey? And should I possibly go outside the scale and manufacture other products aimed at other types of coffee? Can I maybe create a business plan for this instead of investing a lot of money in the same idea that is being repeated over and over again? Or if somebody else came up with an opinion, would that board of directors provide funding for that idea? Or would they think, this guy is too young, he's not going to make it? You know, I myself keep working with young people, and about uh, firms with firms like Trendyol have been consulting me, and as a businessman, I think my group has a single duty, not profitability, not expanding my company, but paving the way for young people. Because as my generation had to face different circumstances, we feel obliged to think about the future of Turkey. This means we have to have younger and educated people integrated to administrative structures. We have the capital, they have the dreams. We have to embrace them and show them the way, lead them. If we can't help them as businessmen on the funding side, we will keep struggling in Turkey. Egypt will do the same, and some Latin American countries will do the same. It's not all about equipment, machinery. It's all about giving them the helping hand. This is the rationale behind it. I am in the board of directors of an abroad firm, a foreign firm. I know what they are doing, but in Turkey, you see that boards of directors are all talking about what will happen in the foreign exchange rate in the next year. But when you go abroad, the firm's board of directors is thinking about what will happen 10 years later. I don't want to be unjust against some of the outstanding firms of Turkey, but they are actually individuals of an entirely different world. If Turkey wants to generate $1 billion companies, just like just like USA, they would have to realize that the revenue of 4 different internet service providers in the USA have such a big turnover that they amount to 2 times the GDP of Turkey. This is why I am underlining that firm owners and big companies need to support youngsters in Turkey too to achieve that. Thank you, Emre. We have about 25 minutes, so we will keep the second round of questions brief. I will turn to Joseph, I am sorry. Entrepreneurship is a culture and it has to start in school as part of education, from primary school to university. In the USA, we believe that it is integrated to education too. I would like to ask Joseph about how the environment is in Cambridge. How do they support in universities the spirit of entrepreneurship?
In terms of the environment in Cambridge, as I mentioned earlier, it's evolved quite significantly over the last couple of years. And what has come up is a lot of grants, so a lot of funding has come through. I believe there's a firm called the Cambridge Innovation Capital, which deals with sort of funding innovative products. I have a guy who keeps emailing me, saying, have you got anything today that I can fund? So there's a lot more money being poured into startups. There are a lot of different competitions. So the Cambridge University Entrepreneurs Society runs a 3-stage competition that starts with 100 words for £100 competition that then leads on to £1,000 for a 1K, for an executive summary, then leads on to a 5K award for a whole business plan. And then the winners of that then go on to Silicon Valley, and then they get contacts with all the different venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. So what we've seen is a lot of this internally. A lady by the name of Sherry Kutu also spearheaded a program called Silicon Valley Comes to the UK, which runs a series of events which invites a bunch of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs to Cambridge and sort of engage with the community there. And they run competitions, one of which I won, which means that later this year I'll be going to Silicon Valley so I can see the environment there. And so that's been the main, in terms of, I would say on the softer side of the Cambridge entrepreneurial scene, that's what's developed in a much more Silicon Valley-esque type of way. In terms of the hard technology side, there's a lot of initiatives in terms of taking technologies that they create and then commercializing them. And so they run this program in which they recruit undergraduate students to take part in these projects. If somebody's doing a PhD on a particular topic, they take these students, put them on this project, and they try and work out how to commercialize this project. And so they're trying to take a lot of the innovation and take a lot of the technology that's happening in Cambridge and effectively commercialize them. So I would say those are the main things that happen in Cambridge.
Teşekkürler. Hızlıca
Thank you. Following education, maybe we should talk about the innovation culture which should be established in all companies. So, Matthias, Wall Street Journal has an infographic here. It says that last year, companies with $1 billion value and 52% of them last year came out of USA globally. 17% of them came out of Asia, China and India mainly, and 7% of them came from Europe. However, during the Industrial Revolution, there were some great industrial companies in Europe. But when technology came into play, we see that Europe is experiencing a drawback. Is there a cultural difference? Why is there such a gap, huge gap between Europe and the USA in terms of billion-dollar technological companies?
I think one reason is, unfortunately, that Europe has very old countries. In my point of view, innovation takes place where young people have new ideas. Of course, it's necessary that the dad doesn't say to his son, "No, you failed. You are a problem." In the United States, as I know, it's completely different. If somebody fails with his company, the people around in the environment said, oh, you are a great guy, you tried to survive, or you tried to be successful. And I think that's different, but I think the main reason, I can see it in the microeconomic in Germany, where we have regions with young people, young family, with a lot of children. They create jobs, the companies are growing. If you have regions with an old society, without young people, normally there are no universities and all that we discussed. So I think that's one of the great reasons. That's a big chance for Turkey too. You are a very young society and you have to give the environment to the young guys in Turkey to try something, to make something new with the family or without the own family. And I come back to my first point, it's necessary, or one part of the environmental is financing. It's in every country. I think Silicon Valley is really special. There are very big technology-driven companies like Intel and so on, and you cannot create it as a government. It has happened in Silicon Valley, and that's great, but I think it's not so easy to establish something similar in, for example, in Istanbul. But I think one reason is, and that's a great chance for Turkey, is a young society. When you said there is a change in Europe, or especially in my country, in Germany, the heavy metal, I call it, machinery companies started with companies like Nordholding. It's a company where I'm the CEO since 20 years. They got equity, and without equity, after 2, 3, 4 years, everything is nothing. So I hope that there is a small private equity venture capital industry in Turkey. I know not all these guys, but I think I hope I know all of these guys. And the guy you don't know that you don't know him. I know some guys, and that's a small industry, and I think it's a great target for you to have firms. Not that we are not a great company. There are a lot of companies like Nordholding in Germany too. But you have to create companies or family offices or banks that support the young guys with new ideas, not only with money, with management support, as a door opener or whatever.
Çok teşekkürler. Hemen Ali Bey'e döneyim. Ben sıralamayı biraz değiştirelim.
Let's go on, Mr. Ali, changing the order a little bit. Just a moment ago you said we have billion-dollar companies, but we need more, and human resources is a big factor. What do you have to say about that? We want to attract talents, right? And we want to encourage them. What should we do in that sense? I agree with Matthias 100%. Entrepreneurship is not genetic. It is not inherited from your parents. And 2/3 of all companies in Turkey are family companies. We know that. But that is an obstacle in terms of tapping that talent pool we have in Turkey. In order to do that, you need to have people with different surnames around you so that you can join forces and join your talents. Another panelist said it before me that to achieve that, we have to get a better culture of sharing. We lack at that in Turkey. We don't know what should be shared with which people. As Matthias said it, there are levels, first level, second level, third level. You can share different data, information, and experience with different levels of people. But in Turkey, sharing is all about lending right now. Here, I am giving this to you, appreciated the person that is working under me. This is what an administrator would think, for example. But we should change our opinion. We have to think like, I am not necessarily giving it to you. This thing that I am lending to you, be it information sharing and whatever it is generated through your efforts too, should be the mindset. This is quite important. The people who work with me are not just appreciators of me, right? They don't just appreciate my look. They don't think I am handsome and I am someone to be followed. There is something else that they find in working with me. Everybody has something in their minds, and that is quite normal. People have debts to pay. People want to have their children educated. These are all natural. But even that is not all there is to it. We need non-pecuniary sharing too, spiritual and emotional sharing. Your working environment, for example, should be a peaceful place for all of your employees. Usually entrepreneurs spend 50% of their time at the office. If they cannot find the same peace as home in your office, it would be like only working, plain working. And it is not something that you do for your future from that point on. If we can do these things, the environment will change. As Matthias said it, equity is important and it renders you independent from banks. Yesterday, Mr. Nihat praised banks. They are praised because they provide a leveraging impact. But in my opinion, the most important value of a company is not the balance sheet leverage. On the contrary, it is the leverage that you get from human resources. Wherever, in which field you may be operating, it is best if you make sure that people still think about your firm just for one more minute after they leave your workplace and go home. I think some of you do it, but I advise you to appreciate the value of the people you work with. But it is not all about patting them in the back and say thank you, or eating with them at the company's mess hall. You need to have a spiritual bond them. Then you can increase the efficiency of human resources. Am I wrong about this?
Bu noktada yine
Just in that point, with regards to human resources, I would like to ask a question to Mr. Ümit, because we are speaking about the billion-dollar companies on one hand, but on the other hand, in entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship inside the company also matters, because the companies should be innovative in order to survive in this competitive environment, and you are encouraging entrepreneurship inside your company. So what can you say about this entrepreneurship inside your company? Because both the owner of the company, both the employees should be innovative. What can you say? First of all, we started to listen the projects of our employees. I can give you a very important impact. The human beings are social creatures. So the biggest impact was that the banks were appreciating us. If an individual understands and sees that his or her idea was appreciated or recognized, then they do not stop thinking. And somebody comes up with an idea, and without listening to them, we reject them. It cannot be. Such a thing cannot happen. Inside of our company, we are encouraging entrepreneurship to change this mentality. This ecosystem have different partners. In the global system, there are many entrepreneurs, and there are entrepreneurship centers. That's why we went to Silicon Valley. And we said to the people who are working in big companies, we talked to them, go see how people are practicing entrepreneurship in other parts of the world. I am not afraid of those entrepreneurs because those talented people can actually leave my company and can set up their own company. Okay, this is a fear, but after all, their ideas will return to me and I will benefit from their ideas. If that transparency is established between our customers, our investors, and our employees, then we can be successful. We should set some principles to us. Okay, we are working with many entrepreneurs, but we should first of all see how much we benefit from our entrepreneurs. I don't know whether we will establish a billion-dollar company from Turkey or not, but if you think globally, yes, we can do it. Thank you very much. I would like to address this question to Jose. Especially in the emerging markets, lack of dream is the biggest challenge because in the emerging countries, they are struggling with the global crisis, so the people are forgetting to dream. So we believe we should dream more in the emerging countries. If you assess the billion-dollar companies, they are not going out of science fictions. I mean, those WhatsApp type of applications, they are just doing a different kind of small text messaging. It's not a science fiction. I would like to ask a very general question. If you would like to establish a billion-dollar company, what should we do differently in Turkey? Especially in your previous speech, you spoke about it. But in order to elaborate it in terms of dreaming, in terms of being courageous, what should we do differently if we want a billion-dollar company?
Let me start by dreaming first and tell you some of the things that I think from that perspective that I'm very excited about, and then I'll be a little bit more pragmatic. I think that we're living an incredible time in the world. I mean, if you think about some of the great breakthroughs that we're seeing, you know, they're pretty amazing. In 5 to 10 years, we'll have self-driven cars. You know, there's some pretty incredible new technologies and developments that are working very closely for helping people age better and live more. There is technologies that are really very close of disrupting and impacting significantly the average age that people live. I mean, I think there's some pretty amazing things out there that are incredibly inspirational, no? And I think that we should start by saying that it's people who dream that are able to, you know, to do some of the things that you never thought or expect that you could make happen. Now, the second thing that I would say there is think about how exciting it is to live in these days. You know, on my parents' time, I mean, my father worked all his life to build, you know, a steel manufacturing industrial group. I mean, today we have companies that are being built from scratch to $12 billion. Clear example of that is Uber, and this just happened in a period of 4 to 5 years with the right resources. So I think that the digital era is enabling, you know, a new way of thinking about how to build businesses, and I think that's really, really encouraging. And for anyone who has an entrepreneurial dream, that should be, you know, something that they should take into account. And that's not the only example. I mean, you have other great companies, you know, like Airbnb and so on, that are really disrupting. And it's hard to say to an audience where, you know, not all of you are coming from the technology space, but I have to be very pragmatic, and I do think that a very big part of the value creation in the next years is going to come from the technology space. So that's one piece. Now, second, how does that translate into Turkey? I think that I've always been very thoughtful about taking business model risk and market risk, and I'm not someone that loves to take both of those. When I have to take business model risk and market risk, I much rather bet in the US, and that's for obvious reasons. I mean, the US is a place where you have a pretty big market, you have a lot of the things that we've been discussing here in the panel. Now, when I go to other markets like emerging markets, and that's what I did with my first company, is to look what's happening around the world. Who are the business models that are succeeding in the US? Are those business models being able to be translated into other geographies? And I think that's, at least in my humble opinion, a very interesting strategy. Now, that doesn't mean that that goes against innovation, but how can, in a country like Turkey, you compete in innovation with a country like the US, where a much higher percent, first of all, the GDP is much bigger, a much bigger percent of the GDP is being invested into research and development. The companies themselves invest much more into research and development. Of course, I mean, I would love that that starts changing in Turkey, but it's not the case today. So the result of that is, unfortunately, that there's going to be less innovation. And if you think about the perspective of being able to build something that works and creates value, I think that looking to other places of the world, it's a pretty interesting thing. Having said that, I've never met an entrepreneur that has been highly successful that has not dreamed. And not only dream, you have to be passionate, because when you start a company, you are going to go through very big hurdles, and you need to have the desire, the drive, and the passion to be able to go through that. So what I can say is, I think Turkey has a fantastic market. I think that the labor in Turkey is well capable, very well educated, also in the technology space. And I think that Turkey is very well positioned to leverage that. In my humble opinion, I think that you need to think about business models that potentially have worked in other places. How can you replicate those and customize those? A lot of people say, that's copycatting. Not necessarily, because building a business in a new market, yes, maybe you are not innovative in the idea, but you need to make sure that you can adapt that. Then if you bridge that with having the right talent and being able to have the right access to capital, I think you can put together a pretty interesting mix, especially on this time when, some of the things that I mentioned before are happening, and where you can really scale businesses with the right resources much faster than you could do before.
Çok teşekkürler. Son sözü ben Emre'ye
I would like to give the last word to Mr. Emre. I will ask a very similar question that I asked to Jose to the Emre right now. So what kind of young population should we have if we want to have billion-dollar companies in Turkey? I am separating companies into two. I am classifying them actually into two. There are companies with the reasonable growth rates, like Coca-Cola. And in such companies, you have partners, you have stakeholders, that's okay. But for the high growth company, they can actually reach to the turnovers with $1 billion or $2 billion in 1 or 2 years. So first of all, you should attract the top quality person. For example, if Steve Jobs were alive, how can I hire him in my company? That should be the question that we ask. I mean, I'm always giving the analogy of the Turkish coffee machine, but if I want a Turkish coffee machine to become a global machine, I should find the most successful designer in the world, and I should recruit them in my team. And it is not about money all the time. So first of all, you should have a bigger dream than the dream of that designer. Without finding the top man in the sector, you cannot establish a billion-dollar company. And you should have a bigger dream than the dreams of those top quality employees. And you should have an administration who has those dreams. Thank you very much. Here, is there anyone who didn't use iPad, iPhone, or Android? Who used it? Who used it? Everyone. So the new generation is coming. They are using iPhone, and Android, but they are users. but we are trying to come up with a generation who is the producer. Just take a look on the internet. You are not using Turkish websites. In order to find out the information, you are using the foreign websites. In iPhone or in iPad, how can you produce or how can you generate an application? If we do not ask that question, then we cannot be successful. Last word, I will say last word and end the session. Very important ideas have clashed with each other, but I would like to give a takeaway message to the businessman and the businesswoman here. If you want to establish an entrepreneurship ecosystem, you have huge responsibility, because if we can establish that entrepreneurship ecosystem, we can be successful. We cannot be successful individually. Thank you.